Tonight we have the pleasure of having a good friend, somebody I met through having worked with Alsaud on a translation of a play by Jawad al-Asadi called Hamam Baghdad. Jawad, as some of you may know, runs Babel Theater, which is here in Hamra. And it turns out that Margaret Litvin, who's our guest this evening, has also worked on his work and done many other things. So Margaret's from Boston University, where she's an assistant professor of Arabic and comparative literature. She specializes in modern Arabic drama and political culture. Her book, Hamlet's Arab Journey, is out, or will soon be out, from Princeton University Press. And it examines the many reworkings of Shakespeare's Hamlet in post-colonial Egypt, Syria, and Iraq. A follow-up project explores war-era cultural ties between the Soviet Union and Arab countries. She speaks Russian. She lived in Russia. She's a graduate of the University of Chicago Committee on Social Thought, and she's trained as a in political philosophy as well as literature. Her articles and reviews have appeared in Critical Survey, the Journal of Arabic Literature, Shakespeare Bulletin. Prior to going to her present position at Boston University, she was Andrew W. Mellon postdoctoral fellow at the Whitney Humanities Center at Yale University. And I should say that Iyad Husami, who's here, invited me there to give a talk at a series of lectures and readings called Nasser al-Arab, and that was, I think, the first time that I actually met Margaret, if I'm not mistaken. So thanks to Iyad for making that connection and for coming out. And I give you Margaret Litvin, whose talk is entitled A Decade of Arab Performance Under American Eyes. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you so much for introducing me and for inviting me. It is so wonderful to be in Beirut. I was so excited to come here that I was not at all able to sleep on the airplane. So please attribute any incoherence to jet lag. I just got in a couple of hours ago. It's wonderful to be here at the Center for American Studies and Research. And on the subject of cultural studies, I have to start with a disclaimer. Some of the comments that I'm about to make might sound critical of intercultural performance or criticism as a project, or skeptical that there can be any serious conversation across cultural boundaries. So you have to understand from the beginning that my caveats about intercultural translation are relatively minor. Like some other people in this room, I've pretty much dedicated my career to intercultural conversations. So I'm not saying anyone should stop trying to have them. If anything, I'm trying to draw attention to the difficulty of the work of intercultural translation, the importance of approaching this work with humility and grace. Overall, it's much better for decent people in different places to attempt to engage in dialogue whenever we can, even if we are bound to misunderstand each other in some ways. So again, in highlighting some of the risks of intercultural performance, I don't suggest that anyone can or should stop doing it. It's just that I feel somewhat suspicious of the self-congratulation that has accompanied the Western reception of Arab performances in the past 10 years, since the events in aftermath of September 11th. And setting up for what could be a dangerous misreception of the so-called Arab Spring. There's a theoretical issue here. Intercultural theater, in quotes, of a certain type, shares one danger with international politics on the model of the UN. Both derive their legitimacy from their claim to represent a group of people, but they ignore the fact that the representative actually constitutes the represented group in the act of representing it. Let me try to avoid falling into this trap in my own comments. I'm going to be talking about two festivals of Arab arts in the United States. I'm also going to be talking about Arab performance and American performances by and about Arabs. My own area of specialization is mostly Egypt. Unlike many Musrophiles, I do understand that the Arab world is not one thing, and Egypt is not simply a synecdoche for the whole range of other Arab societies. However, while keeping this methodological warning in mind, let me for the moment go ahead and speak as though it were possible to describe a bilateral encounter between someone called an Arab and something called the West. I'm preoccupied with such encounters because in the past 10 years, audiences and festival organizers in the US as well as Europe have shown an unprecedented interest in the work of Arab theater makers. Just a few examples will make the point. Khaled Alsaud's 2004 political cabaret, Messing with the Mind, produced in the relatively small and highbrow Hanagar Theater in Cairo, was written up in the New York Times. Here it is. Of course, he focuses on how America is portrayed. Try to show you a clip of it. This is highly technically adventurous. Let's see if it works. Nope, not online. Okay. I'll try to get online later to show you this. Another example, your neighbor and friend, our mutual friend, here in Hamra, Jawad al-Asadi. His Forget Hamlet enjoyed a rehearsed reading at the World Shakespeare Congress in Australia in 2006 to an audience of Elizabethan literature specialists from all over the world. Al-Asadi's plays Women in War and Baghdad Bath were given rehearsed readings at Yale and at the New York Theater Festival, or a theater workshop, after being staged in England and Ireland, and the script of Baghdadi Bath, in Robert Anetta's wonderful translation, has been published in a prominent journal. A brief excerpt from Jawad's Forget Hamlet has just been reprinted in the new Norton Critical Edition of Hamlet, where it will be available to thousands of US undergraduates. Here's one more. This is Al-Kasaba troupe from Ramallah performing Alive from Palestine, Stories Under Occupation, which was awarded Best Performance at the Cairo Experimental Theater Festival on September 11, 2001. Since then, it's toured to several cities in the US as well as worldwide, to Syria, I don't know how they got in, to Syria, the Damascus International Theater Festival, 2007, Algeria, Germany, Norway, Poland, Turkey, Spain, Japan, etc. So why are Western theater impresarios, and by extension sort of Japanese and Singaporean and Norwegian, etc., theater impresarios, suddenly so interested in Arab cultural production? It's no mystery. The events and aftermath of September 11th have increased the curiosity about all things Arab and Muslim among educated people in the United States and Europe. Arabic language enrollments have been climbing, or climbed, and have remained steady. The increased demand grows, I actually think it's a good thing, from a normal and basically decent hunger for more and deeper information than whatever is available from our mainstream media. People want to know what's really going on over there. Furthermore, many intellectuals would like to feel that their theater going is somehow relevant to a political situation in which they're otherwise powerless to intervene. This turn of events presents a rare opportunity for Arab theater makers to find new publicity, new audiences, and most importantly, new funding for their work. A huge relief for always struggling experimental theater folks. But it poses a risk too. The intercultural role can treat theater makers as representatives of over there, turning them into native informants about Arab politics, or even worse, about Arab culture. As you saw, the Times article on Messing with the Mind, it was published in the World section of the Arts page. An audience driven by ethnographic curiosity can turn avant-garde or experimental theater into the most deadening kind of traditional theater. Such an audience is ignorant of the local artistic conventions which the experimental work sets out to challenge and against which the theater maker creates meaning. This audience can misread an individual's creative choices as a mere cultural habit, perhaps something typical of people from there. It can mistake a stylized or even ironic appropriation of a certain cultural tradition, be it a style of dress, music, movement, or speech, for a straightforward part of that tradition. Metaphors are literalized. Satire is misread as fact. Forms of expression which resonated vividly within their original cultural context are either mistakenly assumed to be transparent, like journalism. This is what happened to Alive from Palestine, which is actually a sophisticated appropriation and send-up of journalistic tropes when it played in New Haven and San Francisco in 2002. Or criticized for being too opaque if it doesn't meet audience expectations. If the Arab artist derives much of his or her attraction and efficacy from a position partly inside and partly outside his or her home culture, right? The well-meaning Western audience neutralizes that effectiveness by repositioning the artist squarely inside the home culture. These are some of the oddities and ironies that occur when Arab theater makers meet post-9/11 Western audiences. Confronted with audience expectations of this kind, and by having Jalila Bakar up here, I'm not necessarily implying that she is one of these people, some artists respond by embracing them. No wonder. Who Who can consistently decline the grand title of cultural representative? What intercultural storyteller can resist? And this is the sort of trap of representation, right? Who doesn't want to represent? That's what artists do. What intercultural storyteller can resist seducing his audiences through self-exoticization, like Mustafa Said in Tayyib Saleh's Season of Migration to the North? Or indeed like Shakespeare's Othello, who wins Desdemona's love with his fantastical tales of cannibals and men whose heads grow beneath their shoulders. But the seduction comes at a price. As both these examples suggest, self-objectification starts out empowering the storyteller's imagination, but ends up cannibalizing his personality. His host's worst stereotypes about his home culture fulfill themselves, destroying him. Fortunately, the Arab theater maker in the West need not be a passive victim of intercultural misreading. If he or she is smart enough, it's possible to play with the misreading and make art out of it, deliberately reinterpreting the audience, even as they misinterpret the dramatic work. The Western audience's appetite for ethnographic theater can itself become the convention, the rigid traditional set of expectations, on which the intercultural theater maker conducts his formal and philosophical experiments. Here I'm going to go at some length into one example. This is Kuwaiti British director Suleiman al-Bassam's experience developing and touring Richard III, an Arab tragedy, between 2007 and 2009. This is his adaptation of Richard III. It shows how one smart young experimentalist has embraced the role of intercultural ambassador, while continuing to wrestle with the implications of that role, facing and also parodying the perils of being misappropriated by Western audiences. Much of the Arab or Middle East-related theater that comes to New York arrives via Paris, or especially London. British Kuwaiti playwright-director Suleiman al-Bassam was commissioned by the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, to produce the first ever Arabic-language play produced at Stratford. It premiered as part of the Shakespeare Complete Works Festival of 2007. The play was favorably reviewed in British papers and the International Herald Tribune and stuff, and then toured European capitals under the title Richard III, an Arab Tragedy. Originally, it was supposed to have the title Baghdad Richard. He wisely abandoned this plan because it was too overdetermined. It didn't leave him enough imaginative space. Among other places, it played at Peter Brook's Théâtre des Bouffes du Nord in Paris. So some very prestigious theaters picked this up. It was published in French, too. In the spring and summer of 2009, Bassam's Richard headlined a 3-week-long festival in Washington, D.C., and another festival at BAM in New York, and these are going to be my 2 case studies, which I will get into after I talk about the play. Bassam first became known for Hamlet Summit. Here are some pictures from it, written in English in 2002. It's an Arab-themed English language adaptation, which then got translated into Arabic and toured in Arabic, of Shakespeare's Hamlet. It's a brilliant and sensationalistic adaptation. Claudius became the dictator of an unnamed, imploding Middle Eastern country. Hamlet became a car-bombing Islamist militant determined to, quote, crush the fingers of thieving bureaucrats, neutralize the hypocrites, tame the fires of debauchery that engulf our cities, and return our noble people to the path of God. And Ophelia, frustrated in her love and self-expression, died as a suicide bomber. The play satirized the Arab League, the United Nations, and Saddam Hussein, while borrowing lines from Sayyid Qutb, George W. Bush, Osama bin Laden, and Ariel Sharon, sometimes within a single speech by Claudius. The British press loved it. One reviewer wrote, "The writing is electrifying, so directly relevant to the nightmare that is brewing in the Middle East, so vivid and eloquent in the theatrical means it uses to confront it." And it's basically true. It's set in an unnamed sort of Middle Eastern composite, partly Iraq, partly Lebanon, partly other places not identifiable cauldron of nightmares. But one quickly gets bored of this sort of thing, serving as cultured London's guide to the Arab cauldron of nightmares. Al-Bassam's next major experiment with Shakespeare, Richard III, was a fundamentally different sort of animal. Or rather, the animal of the same species as his Hamlet, but evolved with some new traits to suit its particular intercultural environment. Here's Suleiman at Stratford. I actually took this picture of him. He's very proud to be premiering there. And here are a couple of pictures from the Stratford premiere. This is Richard. Yeah. So this is Fayez Qaza, whom you know, Robert, as Gloucester, Emir Gloucester. And this is Queen Margaret, the remnant of the exiled Lancasters. Al-Bassam's Arab tragedy certainly capitalizes on the hunger for cultural exchange. Located in the Gulf, again in no particular country, but very clearly Gulfy trappings, The show offers the Western audience a primer on some cultural features of Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar. It includes plenty of details we could call cultural. Live music, including a Pearl Fisherman's song. A range of costumes from traditional to garishly, hideous little pink purse shaped like a poodle, nouveau riche. And such rituals as an all-female mourning session, during which Gloucester, dressed in a woman's all-concealing abaya, sneaks in to court Lady Anne. These are meticulously glossed for the non-Muslim or non-Arab viewer. Besides the director's note, the program contained a note on Quranic extracts, or note on the use of Quranic extracts, note on the production, covering settings, songs, and costumes, and a note on the text. The RSC program, this of course was not done at the Kennedy Center, but the one at the Royal Shakespeare Company, also contained the judgment issued by Prince Charles on Clarence House Stationery that Al-Bassam's idea of portraying an episode of quintessentially English history in Arabic is highly imaginative and wonderfully links together two of the world's great civilizations. Thank you, Charles. The show itself, however, wants none of this. The viewer expecting a comfortably anthropological intercultural evening receives an immediate slap in the face. In Shakespeare's Richard III, it is a title character who breaks the fourth wall, drawing the audience into his web of villainy the way that a spider, a bottled spider in his case, draws in a fly. But in Al-Bassam's version, it's old Queen Margaret who speaks directly to the audience at the beginning, only to emphasize the audience's place outside the action. I am Margaret. You needn't be concerned about me. We lost. It's your right to ignore me. I would ignore myself if my history let me. I don't want your loans, your gifts, your reconstruction grants. I don't want your pity. We lost. All I ask from you is not to question my thirst for revenge. It's not because I'm Arab. I have a university degree. Anyway, my name is not Margaret. But our history is so awful, even the victors have changed their names. This is Amal Amran in the role of Margaret. She has an amazing stage presence, and she haunts the rest of the action whenever Gloucester or, what's his name, Catesby or anybody kills anybody, she appears on stage, sort of gloating maliciously, like, haha, the wheel is turning again. So the audience, the Kennedy Center audience or the Stratford audience or whatever, is never, and this is presented in Arabic with English surtitles, the audience is never allowed to forget its outsiderness. The difficulties of intercultural communication are explicitly thematized throughout the play, in countless instances of mistranslation and deliberate or accidental misunderstanding. Thus, as much as Arab politics or culture, it is the West, with its odd mix of greed and bungling good intentions, that serves as target for the satire. The European or American viewer's own voyeurism is simultaneously fed with all this cultural stuff. The music is wonderful, the costumes are gorgeous, and mocked. US policy in the Middle East comes in for special criticism. Written in 2007, the play includes many Iraq War jokes. One character boasts that he can bring nations to the brink of war with a PowerPoint. And there's a macabre dance number, you have to see this, in which Hastings' bloody head serves as the ball for a sick soccer game, while at the same time on a catwalk above, a little vaudeville routine with machine gun-toting chorus girls celebrates the war on terror. Above all, in the Stratford production, the ambiguous position of the United States came through in two characters: the US ambassador, an added character whom Bassam wrote in, and General Richmond. The ambassador, played with consummate charm and some irony by the intercultural, British-educated Al-Bassam himself, was a sinister, but ultimately kind of ineffective kingmaker. He masterminded key scenes, such as the stagey reconciliation between Queen Elizabeth and Gloucester, because Queen Elizabeth had sought asylum in the US Embassy rather than the church. But ultimately, the ambassador failed to predict Gloucester's violence and to protect the young princess. Finally, at the end, there's another American character, General Richmond, played first by British actor Christopher Harvey on loan from the RSC. He lumbers on stage speaking brash American English. Elizabeth's awkward attempts to translate for him emphasize his status as a clueless outsider. The English-speaking audience, who understood Richmond but did not understand what the Arabic speakers were saying, was uncomfortably forced to share his linguistic positioning, and he's the clumsy idiot outsider, right? Just as Richmond handed interim governance to Elizabeth, as a mild precursor to free elections, as he said, the insurgency began, and the first bullets of civil war were fired. This was really the low point of the Iraq War. I'm going to see if I can show you this video. It's from a CD, so it should be possible to show you. This is Gloucester's My Kingdom for a Horse speech. Let's see if I can do this. Can you sort of hear? This is the American General Richmond addressing his people.
Can you put the mic on?
Oh. The language of the surtitles is not Shakespeare because Abdulaziz has rewritten it in Arabic and then retranslated that back into English. This is his kingdom, the horse named Al-Ummah. There it is. It doesn't go anywhere. It only goes around in circles. Kind of tragic evaluation of the situation. Not history, it's tragedy, right? Nobody ever engages him in a sword fight. It just doesn't happen. He gets shot. Here comes Richmond. I'll just show you another minute. This over here is Elizabeth. She's changed her costume. Now she's wearing capri pants instead of the full-length covering thing. She had some sort of very chic abaya before. And she's going to serve as interpreter.
Victorious friend. The day is ours. Bloody Talal is dead. That's Kamada's son. Yaman. Good man. What men of pain are slain. Wait inside.
They're going to start a list of Arab martyrs going back. Yeah. Going all the way back through Islamic history. And Richmond doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't understand it. See, they're going to keep going on with the list behind him, and there's a list of names scrolling somewhere. And depending where the show performed, he had to edit out, like Samir Qassi when he performed in Damascus and things like this. He had to be pretty careful with that. Get the idea.
Oh, sorry, I should turn back on.
Yeah, thanks. So this is a show that traveled to 2 festivals on the east coast of the U.S. in the spring and summer of 2009. What you saw was a sort of highly dramatic ending. There's humor in it, there's all kinds of stuff. Touring even as the US war in Iraq entered its most catastrophic phase in 2007 and 8, Al-Bassam had rewritten the play to merge the 2 American parts. Both the ambassador and the general were now represented by a single character, and what you just saw was some sort of middle stage of this rewriting where he's still a little bit slick, but he's moving toward what he becomes for the Washington performance. In 2009, which is a slovenly bedroom slippers wearing, coffee mug carrying, Bible thumping, sort of evangelical American. This character was designed to stress the bumbling incompetence, not the omnipotent evil, of American imperialism in the Middle East. Here let me back up and talk about the festivals. The first was the 3-week, reputedly $10 million festival, Arabesque, Arts of the Arab World. Yes, you saw that. Here we go. Held at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., the closest thing the U.S. has to a national theater, located right across the street from the fortress-like Saudi embassy. I'm going to pass around a program from the festival. So you can take a look at the volume of this thing, which was impressive. Get a little light. So this festival was 3 weeks in February and March 2009. The other one was an equally high-profile 10-day festival in Brooklyn at BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music, originally called Illuminating Islam, but then wisely retitled Muslim Voices for Arts and Ideas. The Arabesque Festival, here's the Kennedy Center with the Saudi Embassy. They really are right across the street from here. The Arabesque Festival had been in development through the summer of 2008, before it was known who would win the 2008 presidential election that fall. I spoke to the organizer, Alicia Adams, at that time, and her program was mostly already set. But the festival opened in February 2009, a month after the inauguration of Barack Obama. Just 3 months later, in June, Obama would go deliver his famous Cairo speech, promising a new era of respectful relations with the Arab and Muslim world. The changing political climate, our own short-lived Obama spring, boded well for the festival, which was a giant attempt to engage in the broadest possible way with the arts of the Arab world. A lot of this was kitsch or predictable. The Kennedy Center basement hosted a souk selling overpriced handicrafts from around the region. Designer Al-Zafakni exhibited her jewelry. There was a heavy emphasis on the less confrontational arts of music and dance. Many high-profile performers. There were free concerts every night by lesser-known groups on the Millennium Stage. There was a visual arts installation featuring paintings by 26 Arab women artists. Some pieces were more interesting than others, but the installation had them all mounted, artistically mounted on the wall of Mashrabiya, and the title was Breaking the Veils, Women Artists from the Islamic World. Yeah. This being Washington, every Saturday during the festival had nearby Arab embassies opening their doors for tasting of their respective cuisines. The front hall featured a gorgeous display case of ornate wedding dresses from various Arab societies, including a few on loan from the private collections of ambassadors' wives. Even these fluffy elements, I mean, I'm being a little sarcastic here, but even this is hard to judge too harshly. They could also be read as an attempt to show that there is more to Arabs than conflict. You can see what they're doing, showcasing the varied culture of the 22 Arab nations. Okay, is that so bad? Music, dance, theater, art installations, fashion, a soundscape, cuisine, a marketplace, and yet an amazing breadth of culture, presumably a single culture that spans both eons, somehow it's timeless, and continents. Still though, even these fluffy elements could be read as an attempt to show a broader view. And there was also serious intellectual engagement. A who's who of Arab writers you can see when the program comes around. You just flip through some of the panels, they're actually impressive. These writers were brought in to read or speak on a variety of panels. Topics like literature and the real Arab world, migration, exile, and the search for identity. And many of these auditoriums, this is the most impressive part, actually filled up. The Kennedy Center bookstore was stocked with a really nice array of Arabic literature and English translation, books of photographs, Arabic textbooks, all kinds of stuff. All sorts of documentary and fiction films were shown, including Simon Haber's, what's his name in Lebanese? His Lebanese Civil War documentary, The One Man Village. And the 3 full-length plays invited to perform, Al-Bassam's Richard III, Jalila Bakar's Kamsoon from Tunisia, and Al-Qasaba's Alive from Palestine. These certainly didn't shy away from politics, or even from mildly confronting the US. If these plays were already on the international festival circuit before Arabesque tapped them, I don't think we can hold that against them. They're just good. It's easy to identify whose interests would be served, however, by such a grand and tasty festival. And the Kennedy Center fundraisers did just that, inviting Gulf country embassies to underwrite most of the mammoth cost of bringing 800 Arab artists, how did they get them all visas, and intellectuals to the United States. For the embassies, the festival was an incredibly effective public diplomacy campaign. Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, Oman. Look at this, Saudi Aramco chipped in. But that doesn't mean we should condemn it. We don't have to be completely cynical about this. Attendees really did get to experience aspects of Arab cultures that they wouldn't otherwise know about. The most respected news program in America, Jim Lehrer's NewsHour, covered the festival every night in nearly 10-minute segments. Lengthy interviews. They went to Kuwait to talk to Bassam. You can find all this on YouTube, so it has lived on. For the first time in my experience, I heard Arabic spoken inside the Kennedy Center, including a lot of Arab American children. Evidence that there was real interest in the festival from the Arab immigrant population in the nearby Virginia suburbs. Most exciting of all, Arab cultural production was taken firmly out of the hands of people like me, American scholars who study and explain it for a living. And in many cases, it was mediated by Arab intellectuals themselves instead. Some of my colleagues in academia, like Professor Marvin Carlson, grumbled a lot about the Orientalist structure of the festival and the commercialization and how tacky the souk was and what you expect. But for me, the sidelining of academic Middle East studies looked like just the opposite of Orientalism. I won't say a lot about BAM's festival later that year, Muslim Voices, Arts and Ideas. My impression is that this was an event whose political emphasis was more explicit. Here they are, they're also unprecedented, like the Kennedy Center was unprecedented. So the Kennedy Center chose the Arab frame, BAM chose the Muslim Society's frame. They had people from West Africa and people from Indonesia and the Persianate world and whatever. Again, 100 acts from 23 countries. This is sort of how many, how many can we get, numbers game. But my impression is that this was more explicitly political in emphasis from the start. Although, or maybe because, it was in New York rather than Washington. It was marketed and received as a political gesture, a response to the extremism of the Bush years, as well as to New York's own history. The Village Voice preview piece, this is the beginning of it. It closed. It's altogether appropriate that this festival is happening in a city once victimized by terrorism. We've seen the worst from the extremists. Now it's time to experience the best from the artists. Like, these are somehow two performances happening in New York, right? The Empire State Building, this is true, was actually lit up in green lights in celebration of this festival. Here it is. Was the BAM Festival kind of preaching to the converted? During Abdulaziz Richard III, the Brooklyn audience laughed at the PowerPoint joke, as had the audience in DC, which is very attuned to political theater, more than any other audience in America, probably. They were disturbed by the ending, as was the audience in Stratford. In Stratford, one man had asked a very Shakespearean question of Suleiman, why do you deny the closure? You saw how it ends. Why don't you give us the closure that Shakespeare gives us at the end of Richard III? And Suleiman says, well, I don't believe that that's what's happening. So that was a Shakespearean frame in Stratford. In the Q&A in Brooklyn, which I was moderating, the audience was really taken out of their comfort zone. Not by the play, but by one of the questions. One not very articulate, kind of awkward, tense man in the front row stood up to ask a very naive question about what he called the negative portrayal of Americans in this play. And you saw how Americans are portrayed. After, quote, we've done so much for those people over there. Okay, this caused a noticeable tremor of discomfort to run through the auditorium, then furious whispering. Then people actually began heckling and booing the questioner before he had even finished his question. The organizer of the event later told me she had been afraid at that moment that he would do something or that something would happen. Oh my God, could you believe that guy? I was so scared. Okay, the same well-intentioned but sometimes self-righteous population segment. Oh, this is the honorary committee. You can see whom they've tapped. And they'll say Hussein Nasser is on their honorary committee, along with the ubiquitous Queen Noor and the Ford Foundation and Prime Minister of Malaysia, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we are intellectually serious, we are Islamically correct, we are broad-based, blah, blah, blah. And we have Charles Schumer, the senator from New York. So the same well-intentioned and sometimes self-righteous population segment, the sort of intelligentsia, provides the public for a new wave of American plays by American writers on Arab and Muslim topics. There's Betrayed in 2008 by George Packer based on his New Yorker reporting. There's all kinds of stuff. I'm showing you pictures out here. There's a play called Aftermath, documentary theater based on testimonies of Iraqi refugees. There was a whole controversy over My Name is Rachel Corrie as to whether it should or shouldn't be produced. Along these lines, I hear that Ismail Khalidi's Tennyson novelist, which is up here, is going to be previewed here at AUB. Is that right, later this week?
There's a stage reading on Friday.
So yes, this is how these cultural flows work. Coming soon, very soon to a theater very near you. We're not on YouTube, so I can't show you, but look it up. Look up trailers for Back of the Throat. It's pretty intense viewing. It was also published in Theater Forum, as was at Massen's Hamlet Summit. These things also enjoy another set of audiences in publication. So part of the new demand for these kinds of plays is a new interest in the Arab world that I've already discussed. But part of it is a broader story that political theater in general has, I think, in the last 10 years become more relevant for Americans. In the late Bush years, a broad segment of the American intelligentsia, on both the left and the right, mostly on the left, got to taste the basic experience, not to say pathology, of modern Arab politics, the feeling of being ruled rather than represented by one's own government. Leaving behind the generalized power and domination talk of the 1990s, American audiences' political concerns therefore grew more immediate. Perhaps this started with the contested US presidential election of 2000. I'm not talking about movies here, but you could think of Fahrenheit 9/11. You could think of the whole spate of Iraq War movies that have come out. Surely this feeling of powerlessness and concern has been heightened by the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the new millennium's traumas, September 11th, Alwaleed, Hurricane Katrina, the economic crisis. Bewildered by events beyond their control, intellectuals have turned to theater for solace and explanation. And so suddenly, allegorical political theater is not as tacky as it used to be. Political theater was a quaint and kind of problematic term in Anglo-American criticism and performance in the 80s and 90s, but I really think it has returned. And this is beyond just the Arab world. In 2003, Aristophanes' Lysistrata reappeared on stages as part of a worldwide anti-war protest. In 2004, Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 played to mass audiences in mainstream cinemas. And since then, you've seen these plays that have confronted the human cost of misinterpreting the Middle East. But there are also other plays, like Frost Nixon. Coriolanus has been produced an unprecedented number of times, I think. Plays exploring the rhetoric of power, probing the central political questions, both ancient, like what is good government, and modern, like what is legitimate government. The New York Times theater critics last year noted, this was their headline, that directors seek, quote, to be topical in a time out of joint. This is a political use of Hamlet that I've documented extensively in Arab rhetoric, but is now again coming soon to theaters near us. I'm going to leave most of this for the discussion period, the question of how the US media has processed the recent and ongoing turmoil in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, elsewhere. Let me just draw your attention to one incisive argument that appeared in a wonderful new online magazine called Jadaliya, co-founded by Bassam Hamdad and Sinan Antoun. Here's some of the coverage. This is Anderson Cooper's Twitter. His tweet when he got roughed up by these pro-Mubarak thugs. This is the Battle of the Camels. This was the original 25th. That's way out of the name. So here's the argument. This is Rabab al-Mahdi, and she's arguing that in welcoming what happened in Egypt, as they undoubtedly do welcome it, the US media have worked too hard to depict the protesters as uniformly just like us, modern, young, secular, westernized, non-violent. God forbid anyone should throw a Molotov cocktail. We are not going to cover it, because that would break our neat little dichotomy between what's traditional and violent and terrorist, and what's modern and secular and Facebook using, etc. Here's her argument that this is basically the same dichotomy, but flipped, and is just waiting to be disappointed. Hey, I thought you guys were just like us. What happened? Hence, the media depiction can't include the use of Molotov hand bombs, which is violent, traditional, read Oriental, alongside Facebook, which is peaceful, modern, read Western. In other words, that the same divide is being reproduced. You get the argument. I believe this is a valid and interesting objection, and this is what the New York Times has been running. They ran this wonderful series of video interviews, for instance, with people in their 30s from around different Arab countries, disproportionately Palestine. Really articulate people speaking in various languages. This one, I clicked on it eagerly to see what level of Derija he'd be speaking. It turned out, of course, he was speaking French, duh. So these sort of modern secular youth taking their future into their own hands. Yeah, that is how it's being covered, absolutely. So Rabab's objection is valid and interesting, but at the same time, on balance, I've been really pleased with what I've seen of the US coverage. Because for the first time, it does give a voice to people like us as representatives of Arab societies, and does not fall into the Orientalist trap of considering them inauthentic representatives of their society because they are too westernized. This must be something you think about a lot here at AUD. The social media, while they might not have played, here's one more, this is a blogger too, such a determining role in the revolutions themselves, the social media have been absolutely decisive in shaping what American journalists know and can report about the uprisings. Journalists are in touch with activists, they have access to video and translations and real-time analysis by gifted local thinkers and writers and participants. And this has affected CNN more than the New York Times. I'm not talking about the seasoned reporting of some kind of Anthony Shadid. I'm talking about the parachute journalism of an Anderson Cooper. And it's the latter that is more influential with the broad American public. Now CNN is even pushing people to actually read blogs from the region. I mean, it's some of the same blogs I read, right? The best development of all, therefore, as in the Arabesque Festival, is that people like me, professional Western scholars and explainers of the Middle East, have been mostly marginalized, left to play catch-up to fast-rolling events that come with their own articulate, often English-speaking explainers. I'm not trying to over-romanticize this. You can't ignore the structures of knowledge production. You can't pretend that American TV viewers can enjoy some kind of unmediated direct access to what's really going on over there, or Arab reality, or a privileged inside view. Even if they read stuff on Twitter, they might not necessarily know what to make of it. They might not have the context. But still, look at this. The neo-Orientalist establishment, the interest group, the large interest group, claiming that you basically need a PhD to understand anything about the Middle East because it's so complex. This establishment has been temporarily dethroned. The role of scholars of Arab culture is not now to explain the Arab world to the American public, or God forbid, to make American policy, which might seem like a good idea until you think about people like Bernard Lewis. But really to think and write and teach behind the scenes, training the future journalists and analysts and theater audiences and TV watchers of tomorrow. And I think that this is a development that we should welcome.
Thank you. So we'll take a few questions. In fact, Hazem will circulate. We don't have a mic. Okay, so we'll do it. So just speak loudly so that in fact the mic here will pick you up.
Or come up and use this one if you want.
I guess we would roam around. I could like a TV talk show host with this one. So, well, maybe I'll start, since it's so productive, so many things sort of generate. The first thing I wanted to say was I did want to let people know that Tennyson novelist Ismail Khaledi's play, there will be a reading here in West Hall on May the 6th.
Yeah, in Auditorium B.
Certainly one of the most interesting Arab-American playwrights, a very interesting play in which he drew on archival material from his own family, a play set in Palestine in the 1930s. The other thing, of course, is that one reason that we're privileged to have Margaret here is that she's part of the Shakespeare in the Orient festival, conference, I should say, that's starting tomorrow. So there's online an entire program for it. And
Shakespeare's Imagined Orient.
What?
Shakespeare's Imagined Orient.
Thank you. Thanks for that correction. And Margaret will be here tomorrow giving a talk entitled, what? Do you have any idea?
Entitled, like, Rotten States and Unmoored Moors, Arab, Hamlet, and Othello.
Well, it should draw on much of this research that she's been working on for many years. So if you like this, you'll probably like that even more. If that's a pun, I'm sorry. So maybe that will be my question to start things off, and I hope you have some questions too, is that one of the ironies of Shakespeare is, of course, that Shakespeare sort of travels and ostensibly is able to cross borders without cultural interpreters like me or you or others, or not. And somehow or another, this idea that plays have to have that kind of apparatus or this kind of self-conscious turn now. It's almost as if there's going to be a criticism and therefore you have to contain it in your own play. Is this only a phenomenon of, as James Clifford points out, anthropology is a one-way street, basically. It's not like, you know, the Ghanaians were studying, at least historically, the Brits, though it gets very interesting when Soyinka writes a play about Brits. I mean, how do you feel about this necessity, as it were, on the part of people in the Arab world, for example, to have to sort of prefigure what the response of the audience will be? Why can't you just, do art, or is that becomes part of the necessity? And if that's the case, then why don't Americans and the Brits and why don't they need to be self-conscious that they don't constitute a norm themselves from which they're operating?
It would be nice if they were conscious. Don't you think?
If they were conscious?
Yeah, sure. How will this play make Americans look? No, I think it's a question of volume of information. If there's a very limited amount of stuff coming across about the Arab world, and if the overarching structures of interpretation into which you will be put, like a friend of mine is working on Linen al-Ramli, Egyptian, kind of hilarious leftist Egyptian playwright. He has a play called Masks Off, about the hijab. And it's a political satire. It's about the use of the piety movement, the use of public piety by a certain sinister conflation of economic interests and hypocrisy kind of covering itself in Islamism. It's not about public piety per se being a bad thing. Okay, so if that play, which is hilarious, it has it's like Ionesco's Rhinoceros, basically. So characters acquire masks. The mask is like the veil. Throughout the course of the play, more and more characters have these masks. And there's a mask salesman saying, oh, try our family special, 5 for the price of 3. These masks are wonderful. They improve the environment. Everything looks cleaner once you put them on. So that kind of hilarious, politically targeted satire comes to New York. What do you think it's going to look like? It's going to look like, oh, Arab playwright condemns hijab. So I do think they have to be a little bit sensitive because the context isn't there. It's not that they have to be, but it's that it's cool if they can be. If a theater maker can build in that extra layer to, of course it's not their job to educate anyone, but if they can, it'll just ensure a better, more intelligent audience for their work, which otherwise will lose the top, 2/3 of what they meant to say and only get the kind of cultural generalization substratum. Is that true about American or other Western art in the Arab world? I don't know.
Well, just in general, it's interesting, to contemplate the extent to which, for example, Hollywood movies about Iraq have really tanked. I guess with the exception of Hurt Locker, that's really a subject that, at least American audiences don't seem particularly interested in, and it's intriguing, actually. Suddenly, your analysis made me think, well, is there something about the medium of theater that will allow it, or is it this intellectual class that's interested?
I think it's something about the audience of theater, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to a big Hollywood.
People are smarter who go to plays. Is that?
More attuned to certain sets of issues.
Well, I don't want to all to myself here, and I don't want to abuse you because I know you're jet lagged, but I know that there's some people here who actually know quite a bit more about certain things than I do, and I'd love, if you do have a question, or even if you know less than I do, which is probably hard, you're perfectly welcome to, ask Margaret a question. She's here to be, even jet lagged, she's here for our pleasure. I can go on and on. Oh, good. Okay.
Well, I don't know. It's not really a question. It's maybe something. I so much enjoyed your talk. It very much speaks to who I am. I was in the States for so long, but now this is my 3rd year back in Lebanon, and so I'm still sort of confused. Am I looking at things from here or from there? And so much of what you said resonated with me. I'm wondering, and this is a question for kind of all of you, really. It's not. I'm thinking, 5, 10 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, the aspiration might have been, and maybe still is, but let me continue, is to be at Stratford, to be in the New York Times, to be in Hollywood. I'm thinking, and I don't know, but I'm here now. It just has felt to me that this is grossly generalized, but the West, at least in these recent political events, is really besides the point, irrelevant, almost irrelevant. I'm wondering if there is maybe too soon to say, and maybe this is just me being romantic now, I don't know.
So are you saying America has been provincialized in the cultural sphere as well?
Not just America, Europe and America, I mean, that's not where the story is.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that's what I was hearing also, sort of, as you were speaking, just wondering about that, and I don't know if it's even true or not. Those were some of my thoughts.
Well, the margin has shifted.
Thank you for triggering, yeah. It's just,
No, it's a wonderful question. Are you coming here from the margin to report to us? Is that, you know?
Absolutely. In terms of these events, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that is interesting. And American viewers are now clamoring for Al Jazeera on their cable services. So yeah.
To come here and to be produced here.
The center of interpretive gravity may be moving ahead.
Could you tell us a little bit about, I mean, what is it like to be a scholar of Arab theater in the Arab Middle East, or in Japan, or in America, in the United States? I mean, where did you do your PhD? Who did you study with? How did you get hired? Are you even able to teach courses like this at Boston University? Could you give us some insight into that into your like academic and professional trajectory? And also,
where it is possible to do this kind of little marginal stuff on which departments of Middle East studies look down because it's not centered on the Middle East, which departments of English don't know much about. I'm in a department of comparative literature. I mean, if that's your question, it's kind of where to find the institutional place to talk about these in-between moments, yeah?
And how did you get to where you are today? I mean, where's the department of Arab theater in America? You know, I mean, if you could tell us a little bit about what it's like to acquire this knowledge, and the really true difficulty, I think, of doing this sort of research in America.
At the Committee on Social Thought, there was nobody doing contemporary Arabic anything, so I actually wrote my PhD with a medievalist, Joel Kramer, who had been a student of Franz Rosenthal, but who very gamely took on my project, which found some traction, got published, and got me a job because it's about Hamlet, and everyone wants to hear about Hamlet. And Hamlet turned out to be the ideal framework for, I imagined this project, I wrote the dissertation proposal in the spring of 2001, and I imagined it as Hamlet is a good frame to, you know, do this classic Orientalist thing, to explain Arab political culture to people who don't know anything about it because they know Hamlet. And so they send him over. It's not like talking about allusions to Al-Fila or the Quran or whatever item of Arabic turath in Arabic political rhetoric and theater culture. It's something they know, it's Hamlet. And so they send him over and they bring him back and they see what he's wearing and how he's talking, and it's something people can understand. And there has been student interest in that sort of thing. I teach a class on the 1001 Nights in the World, Literary Imagination, and that's a kind of complicated thing to do. World literature, within the literature world, the rise of world literature to sort of partially eclipse comparative literature has created more of a space for actual texts because it has provincialized French theory. And so now you can actually talk about books and writers and also plays. So I think it's a pretty hopeful scene. I don't know if that answers the question of how I got where I am, but it's a glorious place to be.
Well, you have a degree in political philosophy or something?
I have a degree in social thought, whatever it is. Yeah.
But this other book, could you talk a little bit about, we were talking about this in the office. I know I'm jumping in, so if you have questions, please just ignore me. But we were talking before about her new project, which is the relationship of the Arab world to the Soviet Union, which seems like that ancient history, and yet one encounters residues of it here constantly, is the fact that the Soviet Union was so profoundly important in a whole generation of intellectuals from the 70s, 80s, or whatever. So to a certain extent, we're living the result of it. What is this project? I know it's...
Yeah, it's the so-called Arabs and Russians project. It's the broader drive animating my work is an effort to reinscribe modern Arabic literature into world literature. in some kind of coherent, non-trivial way. I'll be talking more about this tomorrow. The basic frameworks for looking at Arabic literature are either, oh, it relates to Arabic Turath, the classical Arabic literary heritage, or it relates to the West and it's all post-colonial. But no, there's this other thing going on. During the Cold War, there happens to be the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. And so what happens when you study Arab writers and intellectuals who went to study, who did study abroad, who lived in student dorms in Moscow, getting official Soviet culture and dissident, whatever summoned up, was circulating in the dorms. And what did they learn and what did they bring back and how did it affect what they wrote and thought and did when they got back and what kind of theater they made. Our friend Jawad studied in Bulgaria. That's where he did his PhD in Sofia. So again, these unforeseen, like you were saying, these unforeseen configurations that come to light when the West is no longer the center to be glorified or attacked or whatever, when it's just part of the thing, the little thing. That's the next project. I can't say much more about it.
Well, but what's fascinating is that it does reinforce, or it answers your question, what is it that, you know, we do, since we're not mandarins with privileged knowledge. If you have deep knowledge of a subject, it will lead you somewhere like this. No one who superficially looks at the Arab world and is, as you said, preoccupied with the veil or preoccupied with all these fetiches of the West, they wouldn't realize, oh, if you really want to understand current culture in this part of the world, one place to start might be the Soviet Union.
So Mubarak and Amr Suleiman are both graduates of the Soviet Military Academy in Moscow. Mubarak was there in 1964 at the same time as Khrushchev was visiting Egypt to inaugurate the Alsaud Dam. So yeah, these are the consequences of these cultural, political, military, economic, everything else continue to ramify.
Do you have questions? If not, thank you so much, and you can have more of Margaret and the imagined Orient, Shakespeare and his imagined Orient, starting tomorrow. Welcome, and I hope to see you all when Bill is here next week, giving his talk and at the Michael Miles event. Thanks so much for coming. I know you have a lot of